All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans near, far, all worldwide. Those who probably are not watching live from Columbus, Ohio, as they filter out of the stadium. Dan, one of your hosts here on the Lens Blue podcast, hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast out there, and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. And we are coming to you live right after Chelsea got sort of embarrassed by Manchester City 4-2 on the day in the third of their U.S. preseason matches, giving some of us some questions, some trepidation about what this season might hold, what it might unfold, what it might look like. And we are going to do our best in this live reaction to share some thoughts, to share some feels. I've got Ollie Glanville, good friend of the pod, with us as well. And I believe off the top rope, Sam, CFC Central, will be joining us as well. But just as we wait for Sam to jump on, Ollie, what is your initial reaction? If you want to put it in our traditional 3-word match review format, you're more than welcome to do so. You don't have to, though, because I'm putting you on the spot for it. But just the vibe, the feeling, the emotion of a 4-2 loss to City 2 weeks before we play them in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think thank you next is probably the vibe I'm going for here. I think just just from the top, the kind of team signaled to me that it was what I would term a minutes match. So, we were making a lot of compromises, a lot of players out of position, trying to bring in players who really needed minutes and prove they did. I think just coming through it and hopefully not seeing any injuries off the back of this would be a big deal. But we saw some uptick first half, second half. It was just a bit chaotic, really, Dan.
Yeah, it definitely had the vibe of proper preseason for the majority of it. I would say that it looked like there was a massive conditioning difference between the two sides. When you saw the way that City were engaged, were pressing, were chasing down every ball, every opportunity. And there were periods of time where, again, some of these were first minutes, right? Caicedo, first preseason minutes, Enzo, second set of preseason minutes. So I think we need to couch a little bit of that as this team is all not ready yet. But at the same point in time, there were some periods of lack of running, lack of intensity, lack of closing down. And yes, preseason is to get your fitness back together, to get healthy and get ready for the season. But at the same point in time, you're also going to play this team in 2 weeks. And it feels like there's a touch of opportunity from like a pride perspective to be ready and show up, particularly when this also is I think the best attended out of the 3 matches that Chelsea have played so far, over 70,000 people at Ohio State University Stadium. Very, very City blue on the day, at least from a just observational view of the stands. But you still want to show up for the supporters who've paid, I would say, a pretty exorbitant amount for a preseason friendly, and to give them something that's worth enjoying, worth playing for. And I mean, maybe we could touch on the fact it just got bad really quick. It ended up getting bad really quick because in the span of 5 minutes, Chelsea were down 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was it was kind of funny, to be honest. The first couple of minutes, and to be honest, all 4 of their goals were actually great pickouts. I think from the Chelsea side, if you're gonna think of it from a vision perspective, I think you can argue that we kind of started and arguably assisted all four of their goals. I think it touches on the wider issue really with the system in general, right? Which is when you bring in players who are not up to speed and do not understand the system particularly well right now, you're going to see some horrendously wide open defensive play, right? If you lose it in the middle, you've got a guy tucked in from left back who isn't back. You then invite the entire front line onto your back line. You're encouraging incredibly high XG good chances, right? Especially if you pass the ball to them in your own penalty box, which is, I don't know if you know this, Dan, it's quite inadvisable in professional football to do that.
Bad
it's
idea.
absolutely not in the manual. So, yeah, it was a tough look. It was a tough look. but this is how Enzo wants us to play. Like this is the gamble. Ultimately, the gamble is that we get more moments like Noni's goal, and like very early on in the second half, where we play through a press and come out on the other side and create high XG chances, and less of us gifting chances to the opposition under very little pressure on the other side. But the reality is, as we get to grips with this system, especially with players of varying fitness rates, and in this case, players massively out of position, actually, especially the ones that know what they're doing, putting them out of position makes things especially worse. So yeah, I think there are a lot of factors today about why it went wrong, but just the amazing amount of mistakes today kind of summed it up, really. And as you say, it started from the very first minute on.
And Sam, as we welcome you in to the conversation, I know there was the wonderful, timely retweet of your newsletter from a little bit ago, around the appointment time of Enzo Maresca, talking about the high risk of the style of play that he is trying to implement with this Chelsea side. And I think, as we talked about in the beginning, there is obviously a lot of asterisks around the team at the moment, where they are within their fitness, their readiness for the season. We were still missing our two biggest goal contributors from last season in this lineup, and Nico Jackson and Cole Palmer, which makes a big difference because the trail down to what Madueke and Mudryk can provide in terms of attacking thrust is definitely a downgrade in that scenario. But how are you feeling 3 matches in with that view of 390 minutes under Maresca? How has this changed or impacted your confidence level of where we're heading or what the trend is?
I mean, I blame myself because last season I sort of like asked myself this question: how would we look without Jackson and Palmer? And I think we just got the answer today. It just was flat. Um, and obviously we managed to get the goals in at the end, and sort of take off the shine of the scoreline. But to be very, very frank with you, 3 games in, I still have the same concerns. I generally don't see certain obvious fixes being made, which could help at least stabilize your system, your formation a little bit. And I think this is, again, a process where he has to take those hard hits to realize that it won't sustain. And yeah, I was just looking at Barcelona and Real Madrid's side. The game suspended because of a thunderstorm. 13 minutes in, Rodrigo is back. Vinicius is back. Both of them are on the bench. Militao and Rudiger are starting at centre back, so it's going to be a pretty hard game as well. And they're going to be well rested if the game doesn't go on. So again, what I'm looking for in these high level games is just competency. Show me you can compete. Show me you have a system that can take on these players and at least nullify certain strengths. And today we didn't do it. I don't really care too much about the mistakes. I mean, that happens when you're half fit and when you're trying to take risks, fine. But so much more, that I expected that hasn't been done. Again, you spend an entire summer watching Kieran Trippier slog away at left back as a right-footed left back, and you put Gusto there against one of the best teams in the world. So those are stupid decisions, to be honest. Like in my mind, I'm like, that's dumb. That's genuinely dumb of you as a manager to even try. I can understand load management, but you've got Chilwell there who plays that role really well. So, why not take that gamble for 45 minutes, see how the game goes, and then manage from there? So, again, questions done. But I'm hesitant to jump in and tear him to bits because it's just not even halfway through. So hopefully, we've got still a long way to go and improvements will be made.
It will be interesting to see how Maresca can try to get a tune out of the side as the opposition just gets better. I mean, in terms of the game to Real Madrid, I think the comment here that we had from Discotheque with it, we conceded 10-4. At least we're playing positional football, which I guess is I don't know how excited I am about us conceding as many goals as we are, particularly when they come down to mistakes, which I think is going to be the big challenge in this system, Ollie, and things we can kind of pick on is, I mean, you had Tosin in the lineup. You had Levi Cole in the lineup. I mean, you have Malagusto and Reece James. Obviously, the left-sided Malagusto is not the best opportunity or best way to take advantage of him, but you generally had what would be very close to the starting defense for this Chelsea side really struggle with those individual errors. And we saw how costly that was last season. And it does feel like there's not necessarily an improvement in reducing out the individual errors, which leads me to believe that our worst Premier League defense that we've ever had in last season in terms of goals conceded could be on record to repeat itself again season over season, which would be a terrible thing.
Yeah, I think, just to touch on what Sam said, I think there's a lot of pertinence in that. Is just, the best utilization of players, right? We know these players now, right? A lot of them have been with us for a reasonable amount of time now, some of them since they were about 8 years old, and we know their best their best attributes, and areas where they struggle. We know now that Malo is not a left wing back. We know he's probably not a number 6 or a number 10 as he was asked to play at times. So when you see him stroll into midfield and he's having to play through balls through the middle, like an Enzo or a Lavia or a Caicedo in this case, like that to me is troubling, because the guy in front of them doesn't potentially know how to cover for him. You're asking Malo to do double duty in terms of go forward, go back, but also maybe triple duty, because you're asking him to come inside at the same time, right? And then on Reese's side, you're seeing that he's actually not involved in our final third play whatsoever. And I thought it was really interesting that when Maresca was asked, he essentially said, well, he can affect play from there. And the only time we've seen him affect play from there really was against Club America, when he was playing balls from deeper down the wings, right? And when you're talking about probably our best, most complete player looking kind of like a spare part in this system, that to me suggests that there are better utilizations of it. Like, I think if you want to prioritize getting the best out of our players, then you probably have to look at the positions they're playing. And it's not like he's Enzo hasn't shown his ability to change things, because today we made loads of changes within a system. We played a very clear back three with wing backs, right? You had Mudryk playing right wing back in a role that was very alien to him and frankly wasn't really going to work from the start. And then you had Malo kind of playing left wing back and then inverting in the second half after Mudryk was taken off, right? So it was just a very confused system from the start. And I think that was down to trying to give Moy and Enzo starting minutes and like good minutes in the legs to make sure that they're going to be up and ready when we do play Man City for real, right? Because frankly, this match doesn't really matter at all, as long as we get through and fit and are ready when the actual time comes when points are actually on the line, right? Because if we play like this at Stamford Bridge, then obviously, the knives will be out from the press. Fans will be discontented in the stands, and I imagine online, right? So, we simply can't play like that. But I think, again, in the first half, we made a lot of compromises in order to try and make things work. Having said that, in the second, there were so many mistakes, right? In the same way.
And the changes in the second, I mean, you look at just the impact of bringing on someone like Madueke for Mudryk. And, I think I'd like to kind of get down this line of questioning about like winners and losers under Maresca after 3 games, to take a look at like who I would say has a better or more solid position in the side, and who maybe is more at risk for being excluded in Maresca's plans. And I feel like someone, we had our Keep So Loan series heading into the summer, and, Mudryk and Madueke are the 2 players that I think occupy people's minds when we think about our kind of next rung of attackers. And to me, it feels like Madueke is the one who is benefiting, taking the opportunity, on the rise in consideration. And, you kind of watched, Mudryk get a full 45 minutes. And I was kind of concerned maybe just within like where his level of fitness is at. And I think the thing that we kind of are having in the comments of the questions right now is about like just, the reaction to preseason. I think preseason, I'm gonna react to this, the fitness level. The fitness level of Mykhailo Mudryk did not look good compared to where we saw him playing in the Premier League at periods last season, where he could beat down, in a defender. He could get past them. He had pace where he was running into. Runs were very, I would say, slower. They were out wide versus kind of trying to bring it into the box, trying to kind of, develop an attack. And so I think that was something, maybe, Sam, as you watched this game and you looked at where Mudryk is at, in terms of his progression, his readiness for the season, and contrast it with where, Madueke, who ends up getting, one of the goal today, and, obviously was contributed in the attack for that 45 minutes. How are you feeling about the two of them? We left Sam speechless, which is the best possible
thing. Yeah, I've just been, I mean, it's the dead of the night here. I mean, early morning, almost 5:30 here. So yeah, it's been a mournful silence for me throughout the game. But yeah, just about beginning a new day, a new dawn shall arrive. But yeah, like you mentioned, Dan, I think there are some optimistic things to take away. Yes, some players are making cases for being in that first 11 when the game starts, but I think he's still got a lot of good and bad headaches left to decide in terms of what he needs to do. Again, where Palmer plays or where Nkunku plays once Jackson comes back as the centre forward, I think going to be two massive questions, because Nkunku's played in that right and left eight slots, but in the Premier League against very accomplished central midfielders and box to box midfielders, I don't think he compares out of possession. Like you put him up against a Joe Linton to track back and to make, some kind of a dent physically without the ball, it's not going to happen. So again, do you try and slot him in as a winger? If Palmer's going to be, your right-sided winger and Kunku your left-sided winger, are those two 1v1 threats? How is your entire side going to look? I think those are some very hard questions that he will have to answer. But like Ollie rightly said, at preseason, you've got room to maneuver and make those mistakes. And obviously, a lot of us have been watching Chelsea day in, day out, fortunately, unfortunately, to be well versed with which player works well. I don't think Maresca, for all the games that he's watched, ever knew how Mudryk could do on the right wing. So if he's tried playing him there, I wouldn't really criticize him, saying, okay, if that means accommodating somebody else on the left, and if you want to try that, then why not? Just the decision of playing, say, Gusto, a fullback, to provide width is something we've not seen from Maresca before. So what stops him from putting Gusto or Reece James as the guy who's providing width on the right hand side? For me, that's a very good solution that could happen in the next couple of games. So it's just opening the door, trying to sort of like nudge yourself towards potential solutions, which is, I think, bright, which is positive. So I would say, like, again, with fitness issues, it will get better. Mudryk again has played 75 minutes, um, KDH 45 minutes before this game started. A lot of the front four just didn't have any minutes in them to make a meaningful dent against a pretty difficult City side. So I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom, but it's 50% in. So he needs to start sort of like putting his vision through, saying, these are my intangibles, these don't move. These are the players I have in my side. But like, for example, I was just discussing this with a friend. I don't think you can play Enzo and Kuku and Lavia in the same 11. Out of possession, that's asking for trouble. So can you sort of figure out a way to play, two of those three, or add Mudryk in there and like two of those four? So again, he has to figure those out and get the balance right. So time short, but again, it's also against some very good sides. It's the English champions, the Spanish champions, and the Italian champions. So it's not really a nice run to go on, but your hands are tied. So you might as well go all out and figure where it goes from there.
So, we kind of talked about Mykhailo Mudryk. We talked a little bit about Madueke. Are there players that you saw in this game who've gotten maybe a little more minutes in terms of, maybe Caicedo or others who I think you're just saying, hey, you made it through a part of the match and you didn't get injured. And yes, you picked up a card, but you're also off the pace. For those players who've gotten a little bit more in terms of minutes or time, I think one of the players that people are pointing out, I think rightfully so, Ollie, is Lavia, because we didn't see basically any of him last season. We're getting a chance to see a ton of him during preseason, multiple times more than we saw last season. How are you feeling about where he looks in terms of readiness? And, you liking him as a player, kind of, just generally for Chelsea as a part of the squad? Maybe not necessarily like just dropping in, as it relates to how he kind of contributes to the Maresca system.
Yeah, I think we've seen the positives and negatives of Romeo's game. I think it's a good summary of actually how he plays when fit in general, right? On the ball, he's very good in terms of being a controller. He has that passing ability. He has the vision, as you saw for Noni's goal at the end there. I think off the ball, his kind of danger perception is very worrying, and it's always been the case, since youth level. Coming through at City, he had issues scouting that space and making sure he was in the right place, right? Even on the Oscar Bob goal, where it goes through Levi's legs, he waits so long to make that recovery run to get back when he should be part of the back line already, right? And it's parts like that when you're talking about the best utilization of these players. So for me, Lavia is not a destroyer and never will be a destroyer. I perceive him as more of a deep line creator, like an Enzo, for instance, right? Where he will win you the odd tackle, but if you're relying on him constantly one-on-one, he's not going to come up every single time. And I think that's just the nature of his game. When you compare him to someone like a Moy, who can be a destroyer in that sense and progress the game forward, then it's chalk and cheese, right? So for me, Romeo would be a perfect backup for an Enzo, right? If you want that role. And that's where I think it comes back to Sam talking about, whether they can all play together. For me, I don't think they can either, because the upside isn't worth how ridiculously open we are losing the ball with any of them in possession and having to run back. Like, Romeo is not lightning quick. Enzo is not lightning quick, even when fully fit, right? So you're relying essentially on whoever is inverted, whether that's the left back or right back, and whoever's going to be that single pivot. And if the single pivot is Romeo, then you're in a bit of trouble, and that's kind of what's been the case throughout preseason so far. So yeah, I really like his on-ball ability, and I think that's his best aspect by far. And I've said that consistently since he was like 16, 15 years old. When he's on the ball, he's a very dangerous player, right? But off the ball, he needs a lot of coaching in terms of that defensive awareness. And then, when you perceive the fact that someone like an Andre Santos has gone on loan to Strasbourg, who maybe has more tactical awareness, more kind of danger perception, if you like, on the ball and off the ball, then it's kind of a confusing step to look at. But yeah, for the 4-2 goal, I think you saw exactly what you'd want from him. He chases back, he sees the danger, he wins the ball. Ugachukwu with some lovely feet to beat a couple of players, and Romeo has the freedom of 60, 70 yards in a really open game to find Noni, and Noni slots it home. That's exactly where you want him, right? But the reality is, as you saw at Southampton, that if you just rely on Romeo as a destroyer and have no one around him to kind of help out defensively, he can get overrun in that transition. And that's not his fault. That's him as a player. You need to accommodate for that. So to me, Romeo would be a backup to an Enzo, whereby he could be that deep lying creator. He could play dangerous balls over the top, but you can't rely on him as a single pivot. And I think that's essentially what we saw at times this preseason, because no one else has been fit, Dan. Let's be honest. Like, he's had to play it. So it'll be interesting when everyone's up to speed, how it looks.
Sam, as we kind of go through the other players who had a chance to appear today, are there players you're feeling better about in just maybe individually as they look ready to tackle a season? Or maybe like inversely, are there players that you're more concerned about, maybe the ones who've had more than one full or half appearance? Because obviously those are the players we're going to give a little bit of additional grace for until at least we face off against Real Madrid next.
Yeah, I think the one person who stands out for me is Christopher Nkunku. And I know that a part of it is just euphoria from seeing him just back and playing. But again, he's played three different positions already, and he's looked very good in all three. Again, today, I think the decision to play him as a nine was correct. But again, when you are playing against a side that makes it so difficult for you to penetrate centrally because they're very compact, it's hard to get those passes into him to bounce it off the eights and usually everything that Maresca likes doing in that central overload, we just couldn't do it. And obviously, when you've conceded from two mistakes, trying to pass centrally in the first 5 minutes, everybody then sort of is on the edge saying, what happens if I do it again? So we just didn't try it at all in that first half. But in this system where there is no emphasis on moving wide, where you have to drop, lay it off in tight spaces and attack the last line and open those gaps up, and Kunku is fantastic. And we did see glimpses where he kept the ball under some really, really good pressure. So I think he's again somebody who's impressed me. And again, in Maresca's system, I don't see the ideal role or position for him. So you will have to accommodate him. But he's that kind of a player that wherever he plays, he will have a definitive impact. So that's somebody who I'm looking forward to. And the second player is somebody that you and I have discussed, and I said that this could be a controversial thing, but 100% Raheem Sterling could be somebody that could start the season at left wing. People might not be convinced, but in terms of somebody who's played a similar role almost his entire career, doesn't need an overlap or an underlap to create some kind of an issues, has a goal threat, has an assist threat. He's right there among, the players that you want in that position. So I know he's had like a tough couple of seasons and the wages sort of keep coming in as a reason to say that, he's not pumping the kind of output we need him to be doing. But his experience, his familiarity with that role will be absolutely crucial. So I think he's somebody to keep an eye on. And like I mentioned, the third guy I would say is somebody I did say that Chelsea fans would be surprised by is Keenan Dewsbury Hall. I think you have to wait for him to be fit. But as somebody on that left-sided eight position who offers quite a lot of stuff going forward and back. He could have had like two goals to add to his assist in the last game, but he just looked a little rusty and looked like he was just wearing out by the end of the half. So I think he could be quite an important weapon in terms of contributing to the business end. So those three players all in the front line, coincidentally. The back line's not really inspired me or sort of given me reason to cheer on after 4 goals today, but yeah, those three guys definitely on my radar.
Yeah, I think there was the look. It wasn't a penalty. If you had video assistant review on this, it would not be ever officiated as a penalty. So I think actually in general, Levi had a decent day out, and particularly when he moved into that like central center back position, kind of across a back three, and we started being a little bit more open, but we also started getting attacking opportunities. So like there was a risk reward or a trade off, if you will, in that scenario. Like I did enjoy kind of maybe how he was playing or kind of contributing in this particular match. I think like Tosin was one where I think there was some questions about just how willing he was to willing or unwilling at points to chase down or close down his individual. And I guess part of that also I'm challenged by the fact that in that scenario, Reese is like pushing so far forward, getting so far into these central positions, and so it really creates some very advantageous situations for the attackers to be in these 2-on-1 scenarios. And you have to decide as a defender very quickly, like, am I going to commit? Am I going to go play back to Sanchez, who does not look comfortable with the short passing or long passing or mid passing games in the role that he's being asked to play. And so I think there's a lot of questions I have about how we're going to actually situate the defense when we get everybody healthy. And the fact that we let Sanchez run the full match versus also saying, hey, to our new goalkeeper we just signed, we're actually not going to put you in for any minutes in this match. Felt like there were just some weird things with the defensive side in this scenario, Ollie. And like, again, we don't have a ton of extra defenders to sub in here for a lot of reasons. But, ultimately, like, we went with senior defenders in every position there. Like, this was a starting level defense for a Premier League team. Maybe not one that was aspiring to be in a Champions League spot or for the title, but all of them are defenders that are Premier League level and have Premier League experience.
Yeah. Again, I think it comes back to utilization, right? If you're going to play a very clear back three in the first half that's sitting, you have to put players there that are comfortable defending width, right? Defending out wide. And one of the key weaknesses of Tosin's game at Fulham was when he was, brought out wide and asked to chase down any kind of pace, really, any kind of pacey attack. He's okay on the ball, but sometimes under pressure he does give the ball away. And we've seen at times with Benoit the same thing, and when he came on, he did give the ball away as well. So I think it does come back to that utilization. I think the problem we have is that we've got essentially three centre backs here who all prefer a central position, who all prefer to have their foot on the ball and that time to, find their man, look forward, assess the pitch, and maybe not have to think about defending wide and covering for an inverted fullback on either side, right? So again, I think it comes back to utilization. Just touching on Mallow at left wing back, like today, I think one of the questionable things is like, if we're experimenting, because clearly that's an experiment, right? Why not try Ben Chilwell? If we're thinking about monitoring minutes and conditioning, and we're looking into potential utilizations of a back three, why not try an actual left wing back there? With Cucurella, who can also play left wing back, maybe try a kind of natural left-footed player. I think that might have been something that would be quite interesting. And especially when you're thinking about playing Kiernan out of position in this game as well, kind of the one player who's going to be a catalyst to people learning the game a bit quicker, that felt like a kind of confusing thing for me. But yeah, I think you saw the difference when we essentially just had those wingers in key positions, right? As Sam said, I think Sterling coming off the bench was bright. Obviously, he gave the ball away in one of those back to goal layoffs, the same way we've seen a lot of our wingers do. And unfortunately, in this system, when a winger gives the ball away and they pass behind an inverted fullback on either side, that immediately brings an attack on your back line. And that's what led to the Oscar Bob goal, right? But Madueke on one side, Sterling on the other side, we did see more dangerous chances created. I don't think that's arguable. Noni comes on and gets an assist and a goal. And yeah, I think Sterling's finish was great. So I think you have to celebrate those kind of little wins. I also thought Nkunku drifting a bit deeper and maybe not having to play back to goal, but drifting a bit deeper and being the man to lay in the front man was obviously a better utilization and something he's really done well with at Leipzig, right? So I think that ball through to Guiu was lovely, and maybe if that goes in, it makes Enzo think a bit about that as well. But yeah,
well, or the Enzo chip, right? That he could have chipped it over. What could have been in? You don't concede a penalty. Like the whole optics of this game, I think, change a lot with the scoreline. I mean, I think at the end of the day, those who didn't go to the game or who weren't enjoying kind of some preseason festivities and making it more of a party experience and we're just there for the vibes, those of us who were forced to watch it at home have a different experience of absorbing this game. And so I think, if I'm looking at it, I always use the wildfire kind of grading scale of like, what is the danger for fire? And it goes from low, moderate, high, very high, and extreme. Like, I think it's just to me, I'm still in like the moderate concern range. So it's like the 2 out of 5 because not everybody's fit. We don't have our two best attacking outlets in this side yet. One due to injury, and one due to just getting back from his extended preseason or kind of layoff of time there. And you also have a bunch of players who are just getting back and acclimatized into the squad. We haven't finished our summer business, which I think is less on Enzo Maresca and more on the club hierarchy and the sporting directors to have gotten sorted already so that we weren't in this position. If you sign Elise and he's a part of the side and you're managing him in preseason versus managing, are we going to use Sterling or Mudryk or Madueke for the start of the season? Like, you were in a much, much different spot. And so I think there's a lot that I would criticize just about like how we've kind of gotten prepared and ready. Like, even to me, it's like looking at the fact that you saw, a full, kit sponsor, even though, the City is probably the wrong example for this, but like they've got a kit sponsor, they've got their sleeve sponsor, they've got their training sponsor, like all ready to go as a part of it. Like they're a serious footballing operation outside of all the other kind of 115 claims that you could count against them. And we rolled up looking like a very unserious footballing operation, getting ready for the season ahead. And I think it's not to say that like this can't be a good season. I think it is just there are going to be a lot of question marks heading into the start of the season that you wish we would feel more comfortable about, whether that's the team's readiness to execute against the plan that Maresca's put together, the fitness of the side, the fact that, Reece James is playing a ton of minutes at right back, yet he's not going to play the first series of games in the Premier League. And maybe you should be sticking Malo on the right-hand side, keeping him ready to go, building a partnership there to take into the start of the season, Sam. So I think there's just a lot of, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of concern. The scorelines to me in preseason never matter. And so like, I am still much more maybe on the side of like, I have questions, but I'm not like at the, oh my gosh, the house is burning down yet moment. And maybe are you in a different spot as it relates to how you're feeling 3 games into preseason?
On the duality of man, I think for me, I'm sort of like sitting on the fence, and I want to be optimistic. I want to give him a fair chance because, I mean, obviously he's got certain things working for him, and with the style of play comes, an intensive, maybe bedding in period, considering where we were last season. So I'm willing to give him, maybe until December to really show us what his playing style looks like. But yeah, I mean, in terms of momentum, City didn't win a single game up until they rocked up against us. So, it didn't look good losing against Celtic, then losing against Milan, then losing against Barcelona on penalties. And then one win sort of changes the entire perception of how ready they are. Your lead striker gets a hat trick, and then everybody's sort of saying, oh, they're back on track. So, takes a result against Real Madrid, takes a result against Inter Milan to set it right. So, I don't think it's a lost cause. I think he just needs to commit to what he's been saying in press conferences, saying that our sole focus is just in terms of improving day by day. So can you recover those two guys, those key guys who are waiting to join, that front line, and then figure out what their roles are, and at least have this sort of set dynamics in terms of how your midfield needs to look. And like you said, there are some fracture points in the tactics, like Ollie mentioned, when the wingers try to receive back to goal and you play it back, there's a lot of pressure on the defense because one fullback is tucked into midfield, the other's a centre back. So you don't want to lose it in those situations because that's when trouble starts. So can you get those mistakes ironed out? And if you can do it in the next 3 games, great. Then after Man City, after the first game, you've got a decent run to follow. So you can sort of, try getting momentum in those games and figure out where you can go from there. So it could go either way. I've preached a lot of doom and I apologize for it. But yeah, you and I are sort of like the perennial optimists on the pod along with Ollie. So I think it's sort of like our job as custodians to say, it's not that bad. When it is, then we can cry over it. But right now, we need to drag other people out.
Well, and I mean, at this point, no Premier League minute has been played, no ball of importance has been kicked, and we are not, at least at this point, fingers crossed, knock on wood, salt over the shoulder, have not picked up any significant major injury on this U.S. summer tour. So again, still plenty of matches left. It's still 180 minutes on U.S. soil. Or 90 minutes in U.S. soil, and then 90 minutes back at Stamford Bridge when we play Inter Milan to consider. But that is hopefully something that we avoid heading into this season, that the team is fit, healthy, ready to go. I guess as you're looking ahead to the next match against Real Madrid, what are you hoping to see, Ollie, in terms of just general step up improvement, whether that's from Maresca and his adaptability, whether it's in a particular player or a set of players kind of and how they're improving, or maybe combinations of players that you want to see that we haven't seen so far?
Yeah, I think obviously, like, Palmer aside, because he's not joining us on this US tour, and obviously Cucurella as well. I'd just like to see him kind of nail down his starting 11 without those two, right? Because there was a lot of compromise in this match, and I completely understand that there are three important things really in terms of preseason. It's like making sure you kind of market yourselves, making sure the players are fit, and understanding the system. And I think we clearly were going down the case of prioritizing fitness today, with the kind of choice of players, right? So I'd just like to see a kind of more structured 11. And if Nico comes back in and he plays central, let's see where Nkunku fits in this system. Let's see whether Enzo and Romeo play together. Let's see if Moy is that kind of deep lying player as he was today, or if he's pushed forward, whatever, if there's more freedom involved, right? From an optimistic point of view, Dan, I would say that if we do get into the system with a fully fit outfit, if you roll the dice enough times with that amount of talent, things are going to work, right? And ultimately, I think Maresca, as a relatively inexperienced manager, if he allows a degree of freedom with this talented group, he will see the upside, right? And ultimately, it doesn't matter how you kind of claim the progress after it's happened, retrospectively. You can claim the upside even if it's not exactly how you envisioned it, and you can stumble onto something that really works, right? I drew the comparison, last week to, or last game rather, to, Conte against Arsenal, when he kind of just thought, screw it, I'm going to go exactly how I want to do it. And maybe it's the opposite for Enzo, right? He had a complete vision for how he wanted every single player in this side to work out. And obviously we don't have Cole back, but we pretty much have everyone else back. Let's see if there's a degree of freedom given to the fullbacks, for instance, if that changes things, if that allows that kind of more natural width, if that allows the 8 to be kind of more free roaming, it gives us a degree of creativity we've not potentially had. Because you saw the difference Kiernan Dewsbury Hall had against Club America, right? As opposed to today, where the only touches he had was when he came in field. And, Mallow had to push on past him, and that led to a huge gaping hole behind them. That's just not going to be sustainable. And I don't really think it was tactically what Enzo really wanted, to be honest. So, yes, we're reading a lot into these games with a lot of compromises. And, cards on the table, I'm hoping that there will be a lot of changes next game and by Man City, because I really want to see what the vision actually is. Because right now it's quite confused. I'm seeing commitment to certain things and then huge gaping changes, the game after. And that's the reality of pre-season, right? But the fitter our group gets, the more kind of consolidated I want the vision to look, right? So against Madrid, let's see as close to a starting 11 as you possibly can, right? And then obviously for Inter, you probably want to start your starting 11. So
Yeah.
Real is pre Man City.
Oh, as our pre-season gets kind of closer and closer to a close, and we start to get into actual minutes. I mean, I think, is there any thought that you have, Sam, just in terms of what, anything else beyond what you heard from Ollie that you want to see in particular when Chelsea take on Real Madrid next week?
I mean, shows that he can do the basics right. At least like that's what my expectation would be. And I mean, it's easy to sort of look at 10 goals conceded in 3 games and, just about eking like a goal a game, to say that it's not a good start, but at least like show us the defining factors of your system being implemented. Like show us that you can build out well against a good Real Madrid side. They still have a lot of youngsters there, so there will be an opportunity to exploit the right, conditions and scenarios. So at least show us those patterns. And you mentioned this on the post board along with Nick and Brandon that you want to see repeatable patterns. You want to be able to see something in terms of if there's a decision being made, then you want to see it being repeated with a high level of efficiency, or at least like with a high level of success. So once that starts happening, then you know that your team is doing something right. Well, right now we're trying to pick out, you know, some kind of tasty bits, like your glass plate has just fallen and you're trying to pick out like grains of rice, biryani, and say, okay, hoping I don't cut myself sort of like situation. So that's what I want to see. Like I want to be able to, so I'm putting together a thread for preseason and I want to be able to put like at least 15 clips together to say, okay, this is what the intention is with the eights, with the attack. And this is how frequently it's been repeated. Right now, I'm struggling to find, at least in 3 games, I will watch this one again tomorrow to find clips where I can group it together and say, this is being implemented. Once that starts happening over the next 3 games, then you can start to be a little optimistic. But again, like we mentioned, he is a very hands-on, will guide you kind of coach. Well, Poch is the kind of guy who puts his arm around your shoulder saying, just go out there and play, son. It's a completely different sort of style of management. So, it will take a longer time to sort of come to fruition. So just do the basics, right? That's my only expectation.
Well, do the basics, get closer to an actual or game day starting 11 for the opening of the Premier League campaign. All things that we want to see when Chelsea take on Real Madrid this coming Tuesday, the 6th of August, which will be very, very close to the last preseason game, which takes place on the 11th of August when Chelsea are at Stamford Bridge to take on Inter Milan. But 2 more preseason matches left. We have a ton of work, it feels like, left to do, but we'd love to know as you kind of jump into those comments after the fact, do you think, where are you on that prevent wildfires danger scale? Are you on the low end? Are you the moderate end, the high end, the very high? Are you in an extreme danger zone and you feel like Stamford Bridge is burning down, Chelsea absolutely heading into the season in the worst possible shape? Or are you not concerned at all because you think it's all going to get fixed when Cole Palmer returns and just makes everybody better, which is kind of something he does. He does have that impact. He is the talisman. So that's going to do it for this live stream. After this match, Chelsea losing 4-2 to City in the Ohio State University Stadium. But thanks to Sam, thanks to Ollie for joining us. Thanks to everybody who joined us on the stream. If you're listening to it after the fact, thanks for listening to it in your podcast feed or watching on YouTube after the fact. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.